And you are listening to Watchmen on the Pod. I thought it'd be fun just to read something that I found on, well, on Google. I guess it was. I don't know if it was Google or Yowzer. I can't remember which browser it was. I was looking, but I found this study, and I thought, well, that would be interesting to read. And as you know, I like to read out loud, so why not record it when I read it? So here we go. All right, this is entitled Judaized Scots, Jacobite Jews, and the Development of Cabalistic Freemasonry by Marsha Keith Schuchard, PhD. Revision of paper presented at I can't say that, Symposium on Western Esotericism and Jewish Mysticism. 18th International Congress of International Association for History of Religions, Durban, South Africa, August 2000. The following quotations, which span 7 centuries, point to an ancient and enduring tradition that identified operative stonemasons and Scottish Freemasons as Jews. Moreover, their craft, and that's in quotations, was a mixture of technology and magic, as developed in the esoteric teachings of the architects and builders of the temple in Jerusalem, and preserved by the kings of Scotland. The appearance of such claims in 17th and 18th century political and Masonic literature has long puzzled scholars who must explore murky oral traditions and anachronistic documents in their search for historical context and credibility. However, two overlooked keys to this mystery lie in the history of Jewish architectural technology and the medieval foundation myths of Scottish nationalism. By examining the historical context of these quotes, we can begin to understand the international emergence of higher degrees of Kabbalistic mysticism in the who I can't say that word, so it's Masonic lodges that wielded such a mystery and powerful influence on the culture of the enlightened 18th and progressive 19th centuries. The occupation of Mason is the exclusive preserve of the Jews. Al-Bakri, Description of North Africa, 1068. The first Christian prince that expelled the Jews out of his territories was the heroic king, our Edward I, who was such a scourge also to the Scots that it thought diverse families of these banished Jews fled them, 1290, to Scotland, where they have propagated since in great numbers. Witness the aversion that nation hath above all others to hog's flesh. What? James Howell, History of the Latter Times of the Jews, 1653. After many days, Charles did reign in Yeland, and lo, his blood was spilled upon the earth by the traitor Cromwell. Behold, now the return of pleasant, and it says ineligible, and that's in parentheses, for doth not the son of the blessed martyr rule over the whole land? Long may he reign in the land and govern the craft. What? It is not written. What? Let me reread that. I'm thinking I'm kind of messing this up a little bit here. Let me read that again. This is what it says. And after many days, Charles did reign in the land, and lo, his blood was spilled upon the earth by the traitor Cromwell. Behold, now the reign of pleasant, and it says ineligible, and that's in parentheses, for doth not the son of the blessed martyr rule over the whole land? Long may he reign in the land and govern the craft. Is it not written? And it says, ye shall not hurt the Lord's anointed. Thomas Traylor, Ye History of Masonry, 1665. I kind of almost find that confusing, almost. Some likewise say our Masons now do circumcision undergo, for Masonry is a Jewish custom. The Freemasons and Hudibras poem in 1723. The branch of the Lodge of Solomon's Temple, afterwards called the Lodge of St. John of Jerusalem, is, as I can easily prove, the antiquest and purest now on earth. The famous old Scottish Lodge of Kilweenings, of which all the kings of Scotland have been from time to time Grand Masters, without interpretation or interruption, down from the days of Fergus, who was carefully instructed in all the arts and sciences, especially in the natural, magic, and Cabalistical philosophy, afterwards called the Rosicrucian, speaking of the Kabbalah as Masonry was called in those days. Jonathan Swift, Letter from the Grand Mystery of the Female Freemason, 1724. I'm kind of hesitant, guys. I don't know why, but I'm kind of hesitant to read this because it's like, this might I don't even know. I'll keep going, but wow, okay. Masonry is a Jewish institution whose history, degrees, charges, passwords, and explanations are Jewish from the beginning to the end, with the exception of only one by degree and a few words in the obligation. The beauty and pride of Masonry is its universal character, its tendency to fraternize mankind. Rabbi Isaac Weiss, Scottish Rite Mason, The Israelite, 1855. Since the discovery in 1941 of the 11th century Jewish origins of the Alhambra Palace in Granada, Spain, revisionist historians have transformed our knowledge of the participation of medieval Jews in architecture, technology, mathematics, and science, not only in Palestine, but throughout the Hebrew diaspora. At the same time, revisionist historians of Scotland and the Stuart diaspora have forced us to re-examine the role of the Stuart kings as agents of scientific enlightenment and religious toleration, who utilized Freemasonry as a vehicle for their Solomonic culture and dynastic preservation. The identification of Scots with Jews emerged most strikingly in the 14th century, when Scotland fought for national survival against her southern enemies in England. The identification was reinforced by an accident of geology, the abundance of hewable stone for monumental building in Palestine and Scotland, which led to similar techniques of architecture and construction. Modern historians of Jewish architecture and technology have overturned the conventional wisdom that the Jews of the diaspora did not participate in artisan crafts or building projects. According to Baron and Wischnitzer, Jews dominated the building trades of the Middle East, North Africa, and Southern Europe, where they controlled the stone quarries and utilized sophisticated techniques of stone cutting, mathematical analysis, and architectural design. In 568, Cosmas in Dicoplidius, a widely traveled Christian merchant from Alexandria, praised the God-given architectural skills of the Jews who constructed the tabernacle, adding that up to this very day, most of these arts of building are most zealously cultivated among the Jews. Other Christians describe the flourishing crafts of the Jews of Alexandria, especially in stonemasonry, wood carving, and metalworking. Let's see if I can say that person's name again. Wittgenstein further argues that Jewish handicraftsmen brought the idea of the guild from the Near East, and that Jewish guilds played a vital role in the transmission of crafts within the Byzantine Empire. What? Now that's almost making me think that these Tartarian buildings are not Tartarian buildings, you know? Let's keep going. During this period of Jewish Masonic craft transmission, there was also a proliferation of Jewish mystical fraternities who developed a visionary theosophy centered on the building of Solomon's temple. The seminal work of this movement, the Sefer Yetzirah, 3rd century, revealed an architectural mysticism based on disciplined techniques of meditation. As Idel explains, the mystic language of the Sefer Yetzirah has a Masonic function, for the letters and words serve as building blocks. Letters are regarded as stones, as full-fledged entities, as components intended to build up an edifice of words to serve as a temple for God and a place of encountering Him for the mystic. After the temple was destroyed, man is supposed to rebuild the temple in his ritual use of language. The Masonic aspects of the divine and human activity reveal a hidden and mighty dimension of the Hebrew letters, which enable operations that can bridge the gap between the human or the material and the divine. How weird. The Hebrew letters also had numerical correspondences, and the complex linguistic numerical computations of the Sefer Yetzirah became relevant to the mathematical skills of architects and masons. Imitating God's creative process, the adept undertakes a Masonic process of letter number combination, meditation, and visualization. 22 letters are the foundation. He engraved them, he hewed them out, and he formed them through everything that is formed. From the foundation stone, he engraved out a kind of furrow, and he raised it like a kind of wall. He surrounded it with a kind of ceiling. He then hewed out great columns from air, which is not tangible. Each stone represents a process of gematria, which stimulates abstruse intellectual calculations. The intense concentration combined with regulated breathing could put the adept in a state of trance as he rebuilt the visionary temple. 2 stones build 2 houses. 3 stones build 6 houses. 4 stones build 24 houses. 6 stones build 120 houses. 7 stones build 5,040 houses. From here on, go out and think what the mouth is able to speak and the ear is able to hear. The great significance of the Sefer Yetzirah to both Jewish and Christian Masonic traditions lies in this interpretation of meditation techniques in terms drawn from operative masonry. Kaplan notes that the Hebrew letters can be used as a powerful means of drawing down spiritual energy, especially through the technique of holding an image in the mind's eye. The Sefer Yetzirah refers to 2 processes in depicting the letters: engraving, chakka, and hewing, chetzavah. The term engraving denotes fixing an image in the mind's eye so that it does not waver or move. When the image is clear and steady, engraved in the mind, As it were, it is usually surrounded by other images. The next step is to isolate it and rid the mind's eye of all other imagery. This is known as hewing or chetzava. The analogy is to hewing out a stone from the surrounding rock. The process consists in designating the desired stone and then hewing away all extraneous imagery surrounding the desired form. Blumenthal's startling computer analysis of the Masonic gematria process of meditation based on the incantation, he put them in order like a kind of wall, reveals that the letters and their numerical equivalents actually form a pictorial wall when printed out from the computer. Similarly, the computer prints out the gematria of he made them like a kind of sunset as a picture of a radiating sunset. This mystical capacity to visualize the architectural and pictorial expression of complex mathematical and geometrical speculation became associated with the practical expertise of the architect and master mason. In the school of Merkabah mysticism, Jewish adepts increasingly portrayed Solomon as an architectural magus and his master mason Bezalel as a craftsman magus initiated in the secrets of the Sefer Yetzirah. Thus, Bezalel knew how to combine the letters by which heavens and earth were formed, while he and his Merkabah heirs could visualize and manipulate the measure of the body of God, called the Sheher Koma. At a time when Christian church architecture was beginning to develop from its Jewish temple and synagogue roots, there was cross-cultural interest in Hebraic architectural mysticism. How crazy is this? Some of this I remember, the names I remember from Deanne Loper's book, Kabbalah Secrets Every Christian Needs to Know. Okay. In the 5th century, at the unusual dedication of a church at Tyre, Eusebius expressed his awe at the Christian builder whom he portrayed as a new Bezalel, Solomon, and Zerubbabel. The builder doeth in no way fall behind that Bezalel, whom God himself filled with the spirit of wisdom and understanding, and with the knowledge of the crafts and science, and called him to be the workman that constructs the temple of heavenly types in symbolic fashion. In the 6th century, Cosmas Indoscleophius, I can't pronounce his name, not only admired the Jews' construction skills, but he shared the doctrines of cosmic architecture advanced in the Sefer Yetzirah and other Jewish esoteric works. Kretschmar suggests that pattern books, as well as oral instruction, were involved in the transmission of Jewish architectural symbolicism to early Christian builders who participated in craft exchange. With the spread of Islam, the pattern of sectarian warfare was occasionally broken by periods of toleration in Muslim-controlled territories, when there was much interchange between Muslim, Jewish, and Christian architects and masons who developed shared guild traditions of Solomon as magical architect of the temple. In the 10th century, the Sufi, Brethren of Sincerity, an esoteric religious fraternity of craftsmen, affirmed the Jewish origins of philosophy and science, and they assimilated Merkabah meditation techniques and Solomonic temple mysticism into their guild teachings. Like the Jewish mystics, the Brethren used gematria, by which they made identical the Arabic words for architect, geometer, and point or dot, muhandis, a magical process which revealed the secrets of the prime builder. The mystical architectural terminology was taught through a dialogue between the Sufi master and his apprentice, while the initiatory relationship was patterned on that of the craft guilds. Trimingham notes that as the latter as the latter had a grand master and a hierarchy of apprentices, companions, and master craftsmen, so the religious orders acquired a hierarchy of novices, initiates, and masters. Since legal Islam tolerated the secret character of implications of the act of allegiance to the Shuchard, master of the guild, then Shiite practice was maintained. Shah sees the origin of Gothic and modern Freemasonry in these Sufi fraternities, and though his argument seems overly simplistic, the development of Muslim mystical craft fraternity certainly bears striking similarities to those of later Christian Freemasons. Sartan's more cautious summary of the Muslim guilds can also be read as a capsule definition of the latter Masonic orders. They are always real fraternities. They have strong mystical tendencies. They attach great importance to their peculiar traditions and rites, which may be strange, complicated, moving, beautiful. They manage to combine the most mulish obscurantism in certain matters with liberalism in others, or rather receptiveness to erratic ideas, unpopular outside the Terraqua, which is the guild. They often obtain considerable popularity, influence, and power. Their power might become political, even military. From the 9th through the 12th centuries, the esoteric traditions of Jewish and Muslim mystical fraternities gradually penetrated Christian Europe in a mixed Judeo-Arabic form. When Christian scholars tried to gain access to the lost mathematical and scientific works of the Greeks and Romans, they often relied upon Hebrew translators of Arabic versions, which included Jewish and Muslim mystical elaborations. Because Orthodox officials of all three religions tended to scorn the study of mathematics and natural science as leading to forbidden magic and heresy, the building guilds, for whom such study was necessary to their craft technology, strengthened their traditions of oath-bound secrecy. However, study in the natural sciences and mathematics led some heterodox Jews in southern Spain to affirm that physical beauty and erotic desire were esoteric emblems of divine nature, which should be expressed exoterically in the mathematical and geometrical emblems of Solomonic architecture. They felt free to defy the biblical injunction against graven images because Solomon, the builder of a fabled palaces and temples, was the biblical champion of these heresies. Excuse me. In 11th century Granada, under a tolerant Muslim government, the Jewish Nakarala family drew on the esoteric lore of the Sefer Yetzirah to create a new symbolic architecture which expressed their dream of an imminent re-establishment of a Solomonic kingdom of art, wisdom, and power. The Jewish Alhambra featured spectacular stone carvings, pointed arches, rotating glass dome, and stained glass windows, which revealed the preeminent expertise of its Jewish architects, masons, and glaziers, who contributed skills developed in the Middle East and North Africa. When the Naharala's contemporary al-Bakri observed that in Morocco, the occupation of masonry is the exclusive preserve of the Jews, he added that these masons carried their skills to all countries of the world, especially into Spain, where his own participation in the Solomonic Renaissance earned him the name of Cordovan. During this period of Spanish Enlightenment, Christian and Jewish craftsmen were allowed to join Muslim guilds, and their possible participation in the Alhambra project is especially provocative because of the surprisingly proto-Gothic designs in the palace. According to the Nagarala's poetic spokesman, Solomon bin Gabriel, the father, was a new Solomon and the son of a new harem of Tyre, the father of all inventors who wrought all the works of the house of God. Ben Gabriel's poetry of architectural mysticism drew on the Sefer Yetzirah, and it became a significant influence on medieval Christian philosophers who eventually believed that he was an Arabic philosopher known as Evesbron. One Christian student of this Evesbronist synthesis was Michael Scott, 1217 to 1240, who left his native Scotland to study with Jews and Arabs in Toledo, Spain, where he incorporated the number symbolism of the Sefer Yetzirah into his mathematical, astronomical, and linguistic theories. Moving to Sicily, Scott worked with the Jewish savant Jacob ben Anatoli on Latin translations of Aristotle, Maimonides, and other non-Christian philosophers. Newman characterizes the friendship between Scott and Anatoli as one of the most significant in medieval thought. Fascinated by Solomonic traditions, Scott gained access to Jewish and Arabic mystical works on mathematics, magic, and alchemy. After consulting with the Grand Master of the Templars, the heterodox Emperor Frederick II asked Scott to accompany him to Jerusalem, where he won the peaceful surrender of the city by promising religious toleration to the Jewish and Muslim inhabitants. Scott made notes on his observations in Palestine, and when he returned to Scotland, circa 1230, he brought with him a unique knowledge of Jewish, Muslim, and Crusader lore. Favar stresses Scott's seminal role in transmitting Arabic theosophical methods to the West, especially the distinction between esotericism and exotericism, the complementary nature of which can be understood thanks to the spiritual exegesis, the Tawil, a tradition developed in Scotland that Scott also brought back architectural skills, which he used to build a great stone bridge across the Tweed. In the 19th century, when Sir Walter Scott, an active Freemason, described Old Michael as a Scottish parrot, Cabalistic magician, and infernal architect, he drew on the earlier fraternal lore. In the 13th century, the conception of sublimated matter, advocated by Evesbron and expressed in Hebrew mystical poetry, was viewed as subversive to Catholic teaching by Thomas Aquinas, who also chastised the Gothic architects who call themselves sages for similar heresies. However, another Scottish scholar, John Duns Scotus, imitated Michael Scott and left his northern homeland in search of Hebrew and Arabic learning. In Paris, he studied with Jewish instructors and became a great admirer of Jewish mathematical and mystical learning. In De Rerum Principio, Duns Scotus declared that he wished to return to the standpoint of Evesbron in direct contrast to Aquinas, and he and his writings in turn influenced Jewish philosophical thought. His development of a theory of living stones drew on the architectural mysticism of his Jewish mentors. In Spain, once the scene of multicultural, mystical, and architectural exchange, the tolerant Nagarala era ended in violent persecution, which forced many Jewish Masons to migrate north. According to Barron, they brought Palestinian stone technology to northern France and Britain, where they employed Christian labor and instructed them in their techniques. In Engiven, England, 1060 to 1290, Jews designed and built palatial stone houses whose fortress-like quality imitated that of the Jerusalem temple. What? In York, wealthy Jews contributed to the cathedral building fund and influenced the unusual design of the stained glass window of the north transept. Often called the Jewish window, it featured geometrical patterns consistent with the Old Testament prohibition of graven images and reflected a Jewish connection with the window's origin. The Jewish relationship with the craftsman who built York is further illustrated by the Jesse window, which includes a seal of Solomon enclosing an all-seeing eye and mason's compass. The fragments of the traditional lore of the Jewish guilds were preserved by Christian Masons and is revealed in a surviving English document of operative masonry, the Cook MS in 1400, in which the scribe drew on the Sefer Yetzirah and extra biblical Jewish sources when he described the origins and development of the craft. The Jewish Christian Masonic synthesis flourished during rare periods of toleration, but it also developed during the intolerant Crusades when knights from Scotland, England, France, and other Christian kingdoms observed, analyzed, and sketched the great stone palaces and fortifications that Jews and Muslims had built in the Middle East. The Knights Templar assimilated Eastern design and technology into their enormous fortified castles, and in Jerusalem, their efforts provoked the admiration of Jewish traveler Benjamin of Tudela. In Spain, the Templars employed Jewish surveyors and geometricians such as Abram Bar Hayya and the Cavalera family, who were familiar with the Solomonic architectural mysticism. In order to attract donations for their architectural projects, the Knights publicized throughout Europe the immense resources that they poured into the construction and maintenance of fortresses. Detailed accounts of the building of the great Castle Pilgrim at Acre were sent home and published, and the Templar as architect in stone became a fixture in the popular imagination. In England, especially the Templars, used architecture as visual aid to impress the populace that their direct connection with Jerusalem, which they expressed in the round church built in London in 1185. The design was based on the Dome of the Rock, a mosque, which they believed was the plan of Solomon's temple, a belief long preserved in English annals and building archives. In 1615, when an English scholar presented a favorable report on the Templars in King James VI and 1, he stressed that the surviving documents of the medieval Masons showed that the knights were so devoted to the most holy and famous temple of Jerusalem that their architecture designed the church to look like a Jewish temple or synagogue. This report was especially interesting to James, an initiated Freemason who pursued a Solomonic building program. After the construction of the Jewish church, the Templars continued to have a significant influence on operative masonry in England. In 1271, the future Edward I visited Palestine, where he collaborated with the Grand Master of the Templars. On his return, he determined to build Templar-style castles as part of his secret plan to first fortify London and then conquer Wales and Scotland. He ordered his keeper of the works to manage the craftsmen and to extract money from reluctant Jews to help finance his architectural projects. Like his father, Edward made the Templars guardians of the royal treasury, and they also held the tallage of London and of the Jews. Thus, the knights were involved in these Masonic Jewish negotiations. Closely affiliated with the Templars was the Crusading Order of St. Thomas of Acre, and Edward I employed Brother John of St. Thomas as master of the king's works. An operative mason who worked with the keeper of works and the master mason, John was given responsibility over the Tower, Westminster Palace, and King's Mews, MEWS. Heisler argues that Brother John's architectural expertise came from his experience in the Near East, where his order carried out ambitious building projects in Acre, Tyre, and Cyprus. Acre served as a center for Christian and Jewish pilgrims to Jerusalem, and it gave refuge to hundreds of rabbis from England and France. The city had a flourishing artisan culture, and it attracted Jewish scholars and theosophers, such as the great Kabbalist Abraham Abulafia, 1240 after 1292, who merged the meditation techniques of the Sefer Yetzirah with those of Sufi and Christian mystics to develop a complex methodological technique for achieving a visionary marriage with the Shekinah, an experience of psychoerotic ecstasy. What the world am I reading? Abu Lafa reached out to Christians and even hoped to convert the Pope to his Cabalistic theosophy. His efforts resulted in the apostasy of Christianity of some of his followers, and it is possible that Abu Lafian interpretations of Sefer Yetzirah influenced the architectural mysticism of Christian as well as Jewish Masons. Meanwhile, Brother John continued his Masonic labors in London until 1297, and over the next 100 years, his order would receive bequests from Masonic guilds. A document from 1389 reveals that an operative Mason, William Hancock, left a bequest to the Fraternity of Masons, London, founded at St. Thomas of Acre. William notes that this is the first known mention of a guild of Masons in the city of London. Unfortunately, it is unknown if the Knights of St. Thomas were similarly engaged on architectural projects in Scotland. Certainly, they had been active in the Northern Kingdom since the early 12th century, when Alan the Steward granted lands to the order in his family's domains at Ayrshire. That Alan allegedly went on the Third Crusade to recover Jerusalem in 1190 makes his patronage of St. Thomas provocative, because his descendants would later become founders of the Stuart dynasty. Through most of the 13th century, England and Scotland maintained peaceful relations, and they shared similar guild traditions among operative Masons. However, a complicated succession dispute in Scotland in 1290s led to Edward I's invasion of the vulnerable kingdom. Edwards had used his Templar Palestinian techniques in the construction of great stone castles in order to maintain his military occupation of Wales. Though he built similar fortifications along the border with Scotland, he was unable to impress enough Scottish masons to implement. This is a long article. This is going to take a couple of days, guys. Though he built similar fortifications along the border with Scotland, he was unable to impress enough Scottish masons to implement this policy throughout their turbulent countryside. When Sir William Wallace raised a popular rebellion against the occupying English forces, he was aided by the prophecies of the second-sighted bard Thomas the Rhymer, whose political and military recognition became part of the Scottish patriotic and Masonic legend. Rymer's policies were subsequently embellished with solemn imagery, which portrayed future Scottish kings marching into Jerusalem. This development was possibly associated with the increasingly public identification of nationalistic Scots with the Jews of the Old Testament, an identification that many believed were reinforced by blood relation. From the 11th century, Scots prided themselves on their racial descent from the ancient Egyptians of Mosaic times. According to their national founding myth, a spirited young Greek named Gathalius joined Moses' army in Egypt when Moses defended the Pharaoh from invading Moors and Indians. After Moses fell into disfavor, Gathalius became leader of the Egyptian army and married Pharaoh's daughter Skoda. However, Moses was friendly with the young couple and he gave them the stone of destiny, or Jacob's pillow, which they carried to Spain, Ireland, and finally Scotland, where it became the coronation stone for Scottish kings. The stone's connection with Jacob's vision fed into Scottish traditions of second sight and bardic prophecy. For early Christian writers, Scotland's conversion to Christianity was consistent with his Egyptian Mosaic heritage, and they stressed the Jewish origins of St. Andrew, their founding saint. By the early 12th century, the Scottish King David I, close friend of the first Grand Master of the Templars and major employer of the Knights, was portrayed by an English chronicler as a descendant of the biblical David, whose royal image as a patron of temple church building he reflected. Elaborating on these Jewish roots, Scottish writers would proclaim David I's descent from Japhet, son of Noah. How interesting. I'm going to end that there, guys, for now. I do want to pick this back up because at first it was like, oh, that's kind of wonky. I don't know what that's all about. But there's something to this. I have a feeling. I'm not sure, but we'll see, won't we? So, until next time, brothers and sisters, keep your eyes on Jesus and your nose in the book, which is the Word of God. And let us embed the Word of God upon the tablets of our hearts, so you and I will not sin against God or be deceived. Love y'all. Bye-bye.